And we are live with another episode of Roll High, Don't Die. I have two amazing guests here today. So, starting with Jared, go ahead and tell me who you are and what you do.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jared. I'm DatDMDoh on Twitter, and I do a couple of different things. First of all, I'm the master of dungeons for the podcast Proficient with Skulls. Comes out every single Monday. We just wrapped up recording season 2. The last episode will hit your earbuds in a couple weeks, and we'll take a little break and we'll get going again. But what I'm here to talk about today is the fact that we just put out our first Coursera's Folly Entertainment, which is my publishing house, put out our first D&D 5e source book, the World of Tele'Thala source book. And yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight, I think.
Super excited for it. Is the World of Tele'Thala what you play in the Proficient with Skulls podcast?
Yes, that's exactly it. We
Awesome.
play in the world. We every single time we say the homebrewed world of Tele'Thala, and now we have to say the published world of Tele'Thala. So yeah.
That's certainly a step up, though. It's a little bit of like bragging rights. Like, hey, we're not just my thoughts in my own home game anymore. It's something that you can go on Drive Through RPG and get yourself, and you can go and read up on these areas and play in the same areas that our podcast is. So that's right. Really cool.
Yep.
All right, Mike, what you got for us?
Hi, I'm MikeMakesStuff. I'm a professional designer and illustrator. I've done all the layout and all the illustrations and cover for the World of Tele'Thala. I've done a bunch of different other things. Right now, I've got a crowdfunding campaign for a steampunk animal book that also raises money for animal shelters and rescues.
That's really cool.
So I can talk more about all the other stuff I do, but we'd be here for a while. So I'll just leave.
I definitely know the feeling. That's why I normally just have my intro pitches. I'm OneCritWonder. I do RPG things on the internet because if I get into all of my side hobbies and what I want to do, like my want to do list at this point is so ridiculously long. But we're not.
Mike will be a guest on the 3rd season of Proficient with Skulls. I've been threatening this for like 2 seasons now. I haven't been able to make it work, but he's definitely going to be on there pretty soon here. So.
Then you answered one of my questions because what I have listened to of Prof with Skulls, I hadn't heard a Mike on there. So I was going to say, like, you made him design for the book, but you don't even let him play there. Like that's.
Yeah, I know. he will definitely be there eventually. We just, I've been real bad about getting guest stars on the show. There's only been one. And now he's a cast member, so I need to get better at it.
So a very recurring guest star.
A very recurring, continuously.
The best kind of guest star. Well, that's actually kind of one of my questions. How did the two of you meet? Like, did you meet Mike specifically for work on the World of Tele'Thala, or is he somebody you knew, and then you're like, hey, I got this project I've been working on. You should get in on this.
That's a Mike story. Go for it, Mike.
It's a pretty circuitous story. I was working at a local Chinese restaurant.
Like you do.
When one of Jared's tabletop players, who is on Proficient with Skulls, he and his then fiance were discussing that they were getting married, and I did not stay in my lane and told them that I do wedding stationery, one of the many hats I wear. So they were kind enough to engage me to do their wedding stationery, and they were pretty pleased with it because I think a month or two later I got an email from Jared talking about wanting to do a D&D book, and that was 16, 17 months now. So just a little bit over a year.
Yeah, and I went into that Chinese restaurant because we went in there all the time, and I saw he actually had you have is it a D&D specific or a fantasy coloring book, Mike?
I have so the Kick-Ass coloring book for adults. It's actually on Amazon. You can check that out. That's a 50+ page adult coloring book, and it's basically what a monster manual would look like if it was
right. Yeah. And I saw that, and I was like, well, this is so. My buddy, the other Mike, had told me about Mike Fikar, and I was like, all right, check him out. So I went to the Chinese restaurant, saw his Kick-Ass coloring book. It's like, yeah, this is gonna work. And then we met up. So we spent that 16 months. We spent probably one day a week at least at a local brewery, discussing, planning, going through sketches, talking about writing, talking about layout, all that kind of stuff. So, having a beer and then working on the book.
So, did you have plans? I have a question before this, I guess, but I'll go ahead and ask this one while it's relevant. Did you have plans to make a book before you started meeting people who could make that happen? Or once you're like, wait a minute, this guy's really awesome at design and stuff, I could totally take my homebrew and turn it into a book. Was Tele'Thala always planned? Not always, but you know what I mean. Were you planning on this project before you started recruiting people, or did you find yourself in a position where you're like, I can make this happen?
So I had planned on the book for quite a while. Like I really wanted to publish this world. The way that I DM when I have the time, and that's not always true, is I really like to almost write out my adventures as you might see a published adventure, right? So I had pages and pages and pages of world building stuff, and about a year before I met Mike, I had started to put that into a manuscript. So when I actually met Mike, I was planning on making this thing happen.
Did we lose him?
A partner, and truly a partner, and not just an artist, but a partner to help me make this work. And when I met Mike, he was that dude. Like we kind of hit it off, and kind of knew that he was going to be, not just doing the art, but also helping me think through all the different pieces of it. And by the way, writing the manuscript, I mean, it's a big piece of it, but there's so much more to do to get a book to press. So yeah, that's how we hit it off.
So how long have you been working on Tele'Thala then? Like at what point did your musings become, I'm going to make my own setting?
Yeah. So, oh man. So we talked about this last time I was on. I think I started playing D&D when I was 11 or 12, 10, 11, 12, something like that. And almost right away I started to DM. And what I liked about DMing as much as kind of running the adventure was the world building and creating new things and fitting them into existing things. And figuring out how all the different lore and histories and all those types of interactions with the world. And so I've been writing things down like this literally since I was 12. And so you'll see aspects of the world, not that you would ever know which one I did when I was 12 or when I was 30, but aspects of the world that have been in my mind kicking around for 20 years at least. But about the time D&D Next, the playtest for what became 5e, came out, I started getting really, really back into it. I've been out of it out of D&D as far as kind of any real like, week in, week out gaming group. I'd get a game group together every now and then of course adult schedules, and we'd fade away, and then I wouldn't play again for a while. But when Next came out, I started to get really back into it. And at that point I started to collect pages of kind of fairly fleshed out material. And then, like I said, about a year, so that was 4 years before I met Mike. And then about a year before I met Mike, I really started to actually write a manuscript.
Got it.
And then we got together and finished the book.
Interesting question. And Mike, what RPGs do you play then? Are you D&D guy, or do you kind of dabble in everything, or is?
The truth of a living freelancer is that I probably don't have a lot of time to play RPGs. I spend a lot of time in that space, but not a lot playing. I got into 3.5 in middle school and high school. I did a lot of 4E, which I know some people have very strong feelings about.
Right.
And I was graduating college and transitioning to being a freelancer right as 5 dropped.
Right.
So I've played, probably about 50 hours of 5e at this point, which is not a lot, all things considered. So I'm pretty familiar with it, but really just managed to hit that stride right. But I played an unreal amount of World of Warcraft.
Been there, done that.
Dragon's Age was a huge deal for me. I recently played one of those old Digimon games, which is a turn-based RPG. So I'm particularly a turn-based fan, which outside of the tabletop setting is rare. But the problem with the tabletop setting is that you need other real human beings, and timing is a thing.
Right. Well, that's where my question comes from on that is, I don't know much about the freelance stuff. I can write my own stuff, but I've never made anything for other people to use. And on top of that, I've never made anything for other people to use in a system that I did not have experience with. Like the one shot that I ran for Jared, sorry, he's over there. The one shot that I ran for Jared when y'all did that whole chicken worshiping thing, like I have cloned, I've cloned that game, and people can read my notes and run that if they want. But like, I would not be able to just like sit down and work on a source book for World of Darkness right now because I don't know anything about it, and I would want to like understand the inner workings of it before trying to organize it. Not just understand the rules, but like where I put what on the page and how I word things. I feel like I would want an understanding of the system. But looking through the book, I have the PDF of the book up here. Nothing like jumps out off the top of my head as like, man, have these guys even played D&D or whatever? Like it's fairly well put together. So,
well, you know, to answer the implied question there, you know, my background from an education standpoint is in illustration and communicative drawing, but I really focused on comics. And comics is the language of know a little bit of everything and communicate it with forcing the reader to do as little as possible. And that's really a super useful skill when you're laying out books. Probably the least interesting but most lucrative part of my freelance practice was book design work. So I would lay out in the course of a year 30 plus books, and a lot of them were boring things I didn't really care to know about. This one was thankfully an exception.
So you have to say that because we're on stream.
Yeah.
So in addition to Jared like organizing his book well to begin with as a manuscript, and I, of course, you know, I was in high school when 3.5 came out, and that was, in a lot of senses, my blueprint for going in and saying, okay, what are the hallmarks of the style of how this is laid out? And what are the things that, with some experience, jump out at me as ways where we might improve? Please don't send a hitman, wizards, you know.
Right.
And that informed, you know, the layout that we built and the design elements and stuff like that. And then dropping the illustrations in places where they're not too disruptive or you keep interest or they're informative and stuff like that.
Right.
Not crazy.
Yeah. And so from my perspective or from my experience, I've been, you know, I said a D&D nerd for such a long time. I've studied, you know, from the AD&D player handbooks and Dungeon Master's guides all the way through the 5e guides and not all of it, but many adventure source books as well throughout my life. I've read them kind of cover to cover. And so I have kind of a pretty good kind of innate sense of how a game, at least how an adventure and how a source book can be or should be, or at least has been laid out in my, you know, reading of it for the last 20 years. So in writing the manuscript, it was really, really helpful to be able to kind of fall back on that knowledge of just, you know, not only have I read all of those different source books and adventure books, which helped with kind of how you do flavor text and how you do, you know, you lay out rules and those types of things. I've also probably read every single like Forgotten Realms novel that's out there too. So I have a big background in all of this stuff. So that was very, very helpful as I was writing the book.
Again, I haven't designed anything, so I'm just some guy who like puts my own thoughts to papers. But I think that's important. Do you want what you write to be unique? Yes. But if the reader is used to 5th edition or World of Darkness or whatever, they're used to things are formatted this way, and then you try to sell them a product that's completely different, there's a lot of people that are just going to be like, well, that's different, I don't want that, and then just leave it at that. So you need to kind of fall into just enough sameness that the reader feels comfortable, and then introduce the things that you do new and differently. So they're like, well, I'd never thought about that before. Everything that I've read has been done the same way. That's really interesting, which I guess kind of leads into my next question. Like, what's the elevator pitch for the actual setting of the World of Tele'Thala? Like, what do you do that will feel familiar to the players, and what's new? What's spun differently?
Yeah. So the elevator pitch goes something like this. So first of all, what you're going to find in the World of Tele'Thala sourcebook is an immersive and detailed history of the world and the lore around the various ages and the gods and those types of things. And that is interesting, I know, to some people and not to everybody, right? But there is a deep bedrock of knowledge about the world that's in this book, the histories of the three ages of the world to this point. Uh, the design intent behind those histories is not just to be cool and a deep lore on the world, although it is. There's also probably 100 kind of plot hooks as you read through those histories, right? That, this creature took over this part of the world for a little while. Well, what did that look like? How do you flesh that out? If you're a DM, you can go in and flesh that out and actually make that your own campaign if you want to. So that's the beginning of the book. We talk a lot about the gods and the breakdown of the powers in this book as well. And again, that's not everybody's kind of bag, but there's a bunch of information on that as well. So a lot of that's going to feel kind of familiar, right? History, lore around the gods. There's a lot of information about the lands and the people. The design intent of giving you something as a DM to latch onto to be able to play with as well. And then we decided we needed some, the world also has a bunch of new pieces into it. So first of all, there's several rules that are kind of variations on 5e rules or AD&D rules or 3.5 rules or 4 rules that like didn't make it into 5e that I thought was cool, that were cool, or something I've just been homebrewing my whole life in a different way. And it's funny when you homebrew it and you just kind of mentally know what it does in your game. It takes a while to actually write it out on paper in a way that will make sense to other people. So there's a few of those things in there, just a couple of them. Suffocating in battle. I think that the suffocation rules are a little bit light in the Player's Handbook in the Dungeon Masters Guild. So if you're really, really tired and you've been swinging an axe for 2 or 3 minutes, and then you fall into some water or, God forbid, something else, what does that look like instead of the standard time that you get? So there's some variations on some things that are cool. What's new and different? So there's 2 new sub races. There's a new subclass. But the really cool stuff that I want to talk about is, and I'll talk about high magic a little bit, and maybe Mike, if you want to get into the Woken properties a little bit, you can talk about that as well. But so high magic is completely a new design idea, I believe. I haven't seen it out there anywhere. I haven't read everything. And the whole concept of high magic is, we see in the D&D worlds all the time these great feats of magic that are like, the iconic ones are the city that lifts up into the air and floats in the air, or the city that teleports away. And there's several other these kind of things that we as DMs, and it's perfectly fine to do, right? I've done it a million times. Just kind of hand wave the magic. That's not a spell you can access, but it just happened because there's a powerful wizard doing it. Well, in the World of Tele'Thala with high magic, we've tried to explain that with a mechanic. And it's actually a couple of different mechanics. One is there's a set of feats, which is something we can talk about in a minute. There's actually kind of, they build on each other. But a set of feats called high magic. And then those allow you access to cool powers, but also to things called high magic rituals. And these are kind of uber powerful rituals that we've tried to balance out by making them plot points. You don't just get a high magic ritual, right? You have to go questing for it. And they're oftentimes they're very specific. So a DM could use those to build a whole campaign or at least an adventure around the high magic rituals. But these rituals allow you to do things, like I said, like lift the city up into the air. One of them allows you to summon a horde of undead creatures. One of them allows you to animate a vehicle permanently. There's just a bunch of them in there that are cool, a little bit different, a little bit of a different mechanic for how to use magic in the World of Tele'Thala.
That's pretty cool. If you have new sweet like floating cities and animating carriages type rules and stuff for those on the magic side, is there anything that you're doing to kind of make sure that the fighters and barbarians aren't left in the dust though? Because there's always that like linear fighter quadratic mage like argument with D&D and a lot of fantasy systems.
Yeah, so 100%. We started off with high magic, and we thought of that exact problem of unbalancing the classes, right? So we also created another set of feats. So you'll find 6 brand new feats in this book. And so we created another set of feats called the Weapon Soul feats. And this is the concept behind the weapon soul is the fighter who picks a single weapon, not a single class of weapons like swords, but a single weapon like a long sword or short sword or a long bow. And they practice and become such a martial force with that weapon that they become one with their blade and actually gain some kind of almost magical, not magical powers, but kind of beyond normal mortal powers when they use that sword. And again, or so that weapon, sorry, whatever the weapon may be. And again, those feats build on each other, so you get more powerful in the weapon soul kind of area as you move up through those feats. Now, with both of them, just talking about the design and the balance, both of them are fairly powerful sets of feats, but they also require a lot of resource. So if you think about the ASIs that you get, you have to spend a lot of them to get either high magic or weapon soul. And so it's a decision you want to get, because your fighter is not going to have a high con or high dexterity, or your wizard's not going to have one of those things either if they have to put all their stuff into these feats to get to access some of the other things. So I think what we found when we did play testing, when we did some statistical analysis of it, is that we balanced it out well enough to make sure that it's a hard decision. Like, do you want to take all these?
Oh man!
Then you are this one type of wizard, and you've chosen a path. So
your computer doesn't like us today. There's been a couple of blips so far where your computer just couldn't handle it.
Oh no.
We're good though. We're good. I'm just letting you know. Okay. So you said Mike was going to explain something called the awakened property. What is the awakened property? Awoken.
Yeah.
Awoken.
You did such a good job last time we talked.
Sure. One of the things I know a lot of D&D players look for in any book, any setting, is what they can immediately bring into their own. And obviously, this book has the setting that takes a little bit of time to spin up if you're gonna incorporate that. And there's the modules that you can play right out of the book. The Awakened property is great because you can use that for literally any campaign. And it's a property that exists for magical items, regardless of, the more common ones or the very rare ones. And Awakened is a requirement that a magical item has. It's got the basic properties, and then it's got a condition. And upon meeting that condition, it's awakened, and it gets a new power, or something about how it functions changes. So example, like a flaming sword might function like a flame brand +1 when you have it regularly, and then after it's killed something with fire damage, it might awaken, and then you get an extra attack or immunity to fire or whatever it might be. And all of the items, with the exception of the artifacts that are in the book, have the awakened property and can do that cool stuff.
That's pretty snazzy. I hadn't thought about that before. Magic items in a lot of the games I've played have been one of two things. Either A, here is a stronger version of your standard sword or bow or whatever. It's just higher attacks, higher damage. Or two, like, here's an activated effect. It does more damage on giants or more whatever. But there's never been anything that, like, I don't know. It seems kind of video gamey, I guess. But like, if you get enough kills within so often, then something happens. Or if you have a weapon that traps souls, and once you've trapped 20 souls, then it does a thing, a cool effect, or gives you a charge that you can then choose to release at a certain point. So that's something I hadn't considered before, but now I'm going to have to pontificate for my own nefarious reasons.
It's a cool thing because power acquisition is so core to RPGs, and so you don't just get the cool moment of I have a new item, but a lot of the times, I have to figure out how to make this the thing it's supposed to be, whatever the next level is. And that also becomes part of the character's exploration of the world. You have to use magic to identify it, go to an NPC who might be able to tell you what happens when it's awakening it, or you just start doing weird stuff until you figure out what it is. Because it's not necessarily something that's obvious.
I had a sword like that in an old Pathfinder game, and I won't get like too far off on a storytelling thing, but thinking about it now makes me miss the work that GM was putting into making stuff like that, because especially with Pathfinder, I haven't played second edition Pathfinder yet, but with Pathfinder 1E, like you got to a point where it's like, oh, cool, another +1 longsword. Throw that in the cart. Like it's a +1 longsword. Everybody's got one, including the characters who don't know how to use longswords. So making weapons like something that's not only memorable, but making a weapon that ties a character to wanting to explore the world, and not just the world, but like the stuff that they have, and really roots them into existing in the world and making it feel real is really important to me. So,
and that's exactly where I came up with the idea. I mean, I very rarely in my DMing style, I do it, and people on the podcast can tell me I've already done it on the podcast, but I very rarely give a +1 sword or +1 whatever, and just say, hey, you found a magical +1 sword. It's almost always named. And as I was naming these things, and especially in 5e, and I think probably some other versions, they do a good job in the core rule books of talking about like what are the minor properties, right? Like it's a shiny blade that it can never be tarnished or things like that. And so I started to spin on some of those things. And so every time I started to make a new magic item, it was always already going to have some kind of special property. I thought, well, how can I codify this or make this into a mechanic that other people the book? And so that's where we came with the awoken property. All right, am I roboting? Am I pinging out again?
It just freezes for a second, and then it keeps going. So we're fine though. Like we're still understandable, but both of us just go like,
I just give you a sad, disappointed look, and then you're back. Usually.
I can see both of your faces, and you look very upset with me. So
both of us give is this the time where it's going to happen? Nope. No. Okay, he's back.
So the last thing I'll say on the awoken property is, and Mike already alluded to this, you don't get to know when you get the sword and you identify with it, or you hang out with it during a short rest, however you get to know the properties of the sword, you learn what its base properties are, and then just the fact that it does have the awoken property.
That it's got something.
And if you want to learn more about it, you've got a quest to go get it, or ask a sage or go to a library. So there's, again, everything at its core in the design intent was meant to bring it back to story and world building for other DMs. And that's really where we're trying to focus on these things.
You're making me miss those old like vanilla WoW, like it takes 4 weeks to go get your hunter weapon quests. And like that is a terrible thing to say with the.
I was gonna say, do people miss that?
The re-release of the vanilla
so much they re-released vanilla.
Yeah, that's true. That's what I'm saying. They're about to come out with it again.
Flashbacks to spending an entire summer farming the tier 1.5 8-piece set armor. Dungeon when 10 people was a dungeon run, not a full-on raid.
Right.
And 2.5 hours.
See what I did? I turned your RPG spiel into a WoW conversation.
Yeah, there you go.
Last group I had on here, we started complaining about Star Wars, and we got into a whole like Rogue One is actually a really good Star Wars movie conversation. So y'all need to make sure that I behave. All right, Tele'Thala. Whose idea was it to do this stained glass window like art? Like, is that something you did?
Yeah,
you did, because they're all awesome. Like,
thank you.
The one that he has as his profile picture on Discord and Twitter and stuff like that. But there's more of them in the book, and all of them are great. So
thank you. Amazing.
Yeah. That is an amazing design choice, and I'm a little bit jealous.
So. I think that's one of the first design choices that we settled on, and that was really early on. I don't think we had done anything else yet, and I was like, let me try this. This might be an interesting idea, because we were like a lot of first-time publishers, we were on a shoestring and figuring out how we can make it work within a budget. And it was like, if we went with something more traditional, it was going to be black and white. And I was like, maybe if I do this style, we can do it in color. And I think it came out I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Each of the sections, it starts with them, and whether it be just the one of them is the almost like Vitruvian man looking, the half's in armor and half is not, and the other one, even though it's just like a bunch of magical artifacts for the magic item and artifact area, like it still looks really cool. And to have those big set pieces is each section of the book, it really like even if you've zoned out and you're just scrolling and be like, okay, well, next to when you see one of those, you're like, okay, I need to start paying attention again because this looks really cool.
The vault is probably my favorite one.
Yeah.
The vault, yeah. So I mean, in most of them, the two that you mentioned, they're detailing what they're going to show as far as this is in the chapter. So the Vitruvian Man one is all about the high magic and the weapon soul, that kind of the magic user versus the martial specialist type of thing, and that's what that chapter is all about. And then the vault one is you're looking through the keyhole, which I think is just such a great concept. You're looking through the keyhole at just this huge treasure hoard, and it's all stained glass. The book, if I could do a little spiel, is my words are great, but the book is worth it for the art alone. It's pretty amazing.
The maps aren't that bad either. No. Did you use a specific program for them, or is that...
Maps are the only visual element in the book that I didn't do.
Okay.
Yeah. Rimflower Graphics is the cartographer on this, and she did a wonderful job, and she's great to work with too.
Just looking at them, you're like, well, that's not quite Incarnate. That's not quite WonderDraft. It looks a little bit custom, but they have that like really good, like worn look to them. So
yeah,
mad props on all the art, all the maps. Especially enjoy that there's like really good, serious lore art, but then also like here's a picture of a kobold with a pot on its head and half of a door as a shield. Like,
well, so you can kind of tell when we had an allotment of those vignettes, those floating illustrations in the book, and we started with the core characters on Proficient with Skulls, which is Jared's actual play podcast. Because we were going to get a lot of utility out of those, both in the book and for the podcast. So that's where Burke the Kobold comes from. And then we kind of took what was left over and we're like, well, what's the really cool lore stuff in the book?
Right.
And work that in there.
Yeah.
No, it's really important, like, especially when you're doing things and trying to A, get the most for your money, and B, spend enough money so that it's good, but not like put yourself in a position where you're hurting. If you're like, I need this picture for my website, my podcast, and the book, that'll be great. Instead of like trying to come up with A, new art, but B, art that you use in the book, but then can't use anywhere else. So
yeah, exactly. We did a good job of being able to kind of spread that art around as much as possible and use it in various different places.
It also makes one hell of a Twitter like banner across the top of your profile too. So mad props on all the art throughout.
Now I have to say, like, there's just before we move on, I gotta keep propping the art because it's so good. We chose to do a couple of the goddesses actually. Instead of doing the three main gods of the pantheon, there's a bunch of other gods, demigods, powers in the world. And we chose to do two sisters and do the art for them, the Queen of Fortune and Iotha, the Queen of All That Crawls. And the art for them is kind of like an Easter egg hunt. So if you read their description and what they're all about, and then look at the art, you will find little bits and pieces that are like, oh, that's not a belt, that's a scorpion that's hanging around her waist. And like, just like some cool little things that are in each of those, like, very detailed. Mike really thought about kind of all the details in the art. So
I'm gonna need to do some scrolling back through then.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Like
cool.
I said, I've got it up over on the side just to give myself some like question jump starting points. But I'm gonna have to. I need to do a proper deep dive. Life has just been too busy. Jared and I were talking about having him come on my channel because I do like collaborative one shots. Having him come on and run either his own one shot, or there are like little adventure hook module things in the book, and so kind of like a sneak peek type stuff, so that we could run something and then go, if this excites you, it's in the book, check out the book.
That's right. We haven't mentioned that yet. There's 3 mini adventures in the book that are all you can go dive into the world right away. You don't have to even create anything. It's all right there for you.
Yep. Like I said, we've been trying to put that together, but life is just between the newborn and work and like you said, adult schedules. That's the real like big bad of any
almost impossible
RPG campaign is the group calendar.
Mm-hmm. We'll get it done though. We'll get it there.
Gregory says he was going to ask about the mini adventures because knowing Gregory, he would be all about being a player and being a part of that. So
we'll get Gregory when we do it, because we will do it. We'll definitely get Gregory in there, and Mike. I'd love to get you in there as well. Let's talk about the mini adventures for just a second. So, right, there's 3 of them in the book. They're all pretty well fleshed out, and so we didn't want to write a 100-page adventure for the book, but we wanted to give you enough to make sure you could fully run it. So they each have their own map that comes with the like a dungeon map that comes with it, and they're 3 very different adventures. So one of them
like
is
thematically different.
Yeah. So one of them is a dungeon crawl, for all intents and purposes. You're going into a dragon's lair for X, Y, and Z reasons, and there's a little bit of overworld travel and some things that happen before that, but then it's, for all intents and purposes, a dungeon crawl. One of them is kind of a large scale battle with armies, and your PCs fit into that, and there's some mechanics that we wrote around how that specific adventure is kind of like you have to kill so many orcs over a certain amount of time to be successful in that adventure. And there's a bunch of other things you can do and ways to interact with that as well. But it's basically a large scale armies battling each other. The dwarves are under attack type of thing. And then the last one is really unique. And I haven't mentioned this, there were co-writers as well. Mike Schneider, who's one of the guys on my podcast, and Joe Pescia, one of the other guys on my podcast, helped write these adventures. And so the last one is all about, as an adventuring group, your job is to kind of knows the underground factions a little bit. And he owns a junkyard, a garbage heap, and his whole thing is, I need you to smuggle some contraband for me, but I'm not going to give you a boat to go get this. You have to build the boat, go to the island, pick up the contraband, and then get back. And if you beat the other people to do it, then I'll give you the contact versus, I don't know.
We lost you for a second, and Chad is asking if you could give the quick on number 3 again.
I will try. And I'm so sorry. My computer is dying on me. So just let me know whenever I time out, and I will start over again. So number 3 is, it's all about the party is trying to find and get in good with an underground contact with like the criminal underground and a certain faction in the world. And his kind of test for the party is that he needs you to kind of steal and go find some contraband for him. And you need to do this by going it's in a city that's a port city. So you need to take a boat somewhere and get the stuff and bring it back. But he doesn't give you a boat. You have to use his junkyard and build a boat. And once you build a boat, then you can kind of basically race it across the Gulf and figure out how to get back in time.
I've never had a Junkyard Wars episode themed. Like, you got 30 minutes to build based off of whatever you can grab your hands on. Go.
Yeah. That was Joe Pescia. He built that, and he did that as a one shot, and then we built it together to actually put it into usable form for everybody else in the book. And we've run it once as a group, and we're going to run it again as a kind of a one shot for our channel as well. But it's a really fun adventure, really kind of zany adventure. So yeah.
Okay, well, we talked about magic and we talked about magic items, but one of the 2 things that I look for when I'm like scoping out settings and stuff is magic level and technology level. So where do you put the World of Tele'Thala? Is it Lord of the Rings? Is it steampunk? Is it where on the scale?
What level is steam-powered railguns?
I feel like that's just a hair of Eberron and a little bit of Ravnica, and so
there's Mike. Do you want to give it a shot from what you know? And then
you actually know the answer. I'm just being a jerk.
No. So it's so first of all, high magic is how I would describe it, and how it is literally described in the book. So magic is kind of everywhere. Most common folk would have come in contact with some very minor forms of magic at some point. And so, there is magic abound in the world. So more than that, as far as technology goes, there are certain places and certain cultures that have a little bit of that steampunk powered by like a magic core type of thing going on. But very little. I kind of kept it very specific to kind of some subcontinent type of areas that are a little bit separated from the rest of the world, and so that's how they kind of morphed or evolved over time to be something different than the rest of the world. So yeah, and there's not a ton about that in the world in the source book. That's kind of book number 2 or one of the adventures we're planning to come out with next. But that's the concept of the world, is that's where it's at.
Okay. Another interesting question, I guess. What does your standard adventuring party kind of do in Telethala, right? With the Sword Coast, there's always, well, there's dragons, there's orcs. With Dark Sun, like, you kind of know what you're getting into. With Eberron, there's attacking Warforged from the Lord of Blades. Like, what's there to do out in the world? What sort of adventures can people expect in this area?
Yeah, so even the most populated countries in the world are still, the major cities might be defined as cosmopolitan for the kind of setting, but there are large swaths of wild wilderness around almost all of them that are untamed. There's a few kind of settled heartlands, but for the most part, it's kind of frontier adventuring. So we're talking orcs and goblins, of course. There's dragons as well, but I mean, I think that depending on where you're at in the world, you're going to get a little bit of all of those different pieces of kind of fantasy trope, if you will. Like, there's definitely a bunch of kind of, you're in the wilderness and you're looking for the dragon's lair, big major kingdoms where there's 100 different nobles. Am I gone again?
We lost you right after
nobles.
Dragon's Lair, but you came back in for 100 nobles.
Okay, so, and there's these big cities where there's 100 different noble houses, and there's a lot of political intrigue and those types of things as well. So you can find a little bit of all of it. We have not explored the concept of Warforged very much, so that's one area where I'd say we haven't done a whole lot with that. But there's definitely places in the world where that makes sense.
Got it. Okay. Are there any classes, races, or like mechanics that people would expect that you put a different spin on, right? Are there any things where it's like, if you're an elf in this world, elves are actually very barbaric instead of like hoity-toity forest people? Is there anything that like would be a shock in being different for your standard high fantasy Sword Coast type flavor?
The Tabaxi type of, so that you mentioned barbaric, the Tabaxi type of character of playable race is considered, for the most part, very tribal and nomadic. They come from the jungle areas for the most part, and so they have that kind of flavor to them. I don't know if that's very different than kind of the rest of the world. And then the other thing I would say is that in the book, actually, the Dragonborn race is kind of divided into two, which is the standard Dragonborn and those who have stayed more closely aligned with their elemental affinities. Dragons who the Dragonborn in this world came from the elemental waste, and they were brought here by one of the gods. And so some of them, a major tribe of them, has stayed very connected to their elemental forms. This is where you get Dragonborn with wings, or those that can actually kind of light themselves on fire, or else can swim and those types of things. And so there's a whole different kind of subrace of Dragonborn in here as well. And then just a little Easter egg that I haven't published in the book yet, but there are an aquatic race of halflings that we get into a little bit that'll be coming out in a future expansion. So they have underwater cities and those types of things. So not a whole bunch of big variations, but just a few little tweaks here and there.
No worries. That's good. Chat says, is high magic something of a lost art and it's up to the players to find again? Or are there proficient practitioners of high magic that are aloof or reclusive?
Yeah, so for the most part, it's a lost art, or an art that is so rare within the world that those that practice the high magic don't really, it's not proliferated out in the world. Like, there's not a bunch of scrolls you can go find at a scroll shop. There's very little of it out there, just simply because there's so few people in the world that can actually access the top levels of it. Let me so that's the highest levels of high magic, but we've also taken it so that you can access some of the high magic rituals kind of from a mid tier. So around 5th or 6th level, you can start to get into some of that stuff. And one of the cool things, at least I think is cool, is that we've done is we've built enchanting items and an enchanting items table all around a high magic ritual, which would be a more common, although not common, but a more common ritual. And it kind of helps explain how magic items in general are enchanted in the world of Tele'Thala. So you have to be a high magic practitioner to enchant magic items, and you have this high magic ritual, and then you can see the different various things mechanically that you have to do to actually build out a common magic item or an uncommon magic item, and those types of things. So,
well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, at the top levels, it's definitely very reclusive. Very few people have access to it, and you would have to go search those things out.
Gregory's in chat, and he's digging everything you just said about that. So
that's awesome. Very cool.
We've got about 10 minutes left of our hour. Any open field, whatever both of y'all want to talk about, any last things y'all want to get in on this?
Mike, I've been talking a lot, so and pausing a lot too, so go for it.
Yeah. Obviously, we want you to like and follow and all that stuff, but there's a couple of really good reasons for that. We're going to be releasing the mini adventures, so if you're someone who's kind of on the fence, the mini adventures will be coming up on drive-through in the next couple of weeks, so you can pick one of those up if you kind of are geeking on it and enjoying it, or your group enjoys it. Then helps you decide to go ahead and make a commitment to the book itself. We are going to be doing more books, so we're still kind of figuring out what the plan is on that, but we've got more options than we have time, so we'll figure out what those are. And then my personal plug, and I'll give you the link if you want to share later, to that crowdfunding campaign that I'm running right now, because that raises stuff for charity.
I have everyone's like Twitter things on the overlay, but normally afterwards I hit you up, and anything you want to go into the YouTube video description and the Twitch video description, just shoot me, or have Jared shoot me on Discord, and I'll make sure that it's all in there. So anything you want to pitch, especially like the charity stuff, it'll be
I'll
down
tweet
below.
At you. And as far as the book is concerned, just pick it up. And Jared's super active on Twitter, so if you're reading it and you have questions, or you've got an idea on how to integrate something, it's all super interactive.
Yeah, you would make my day if you tweeted at me about the book. It'd be great. I will kind of piggyback on some of the stuff that Mike said. We have the one book app, but we have big plans, right? And just so you know, if you pick up the World of Tele'Thala and you think to yourself, I love this, and or you're thinking about it, but you're worried that we're not going to be able to put out more things. We already have plans for the second and third book, and I have hundreds of pages written that we haven't published yet, right? So there's almost a full campaign that I've written on at some level. There's additional kind of regional guides and more detail on certain things. So if you like it, but you're worried that we're not going to continue to fund that world, we are going to continue to fund that world. And as far as I'm concerned, as plugging stuff, coursersfolly.com is the website, and you can kind of get to the book, get to the podcast from there. And you can find really everything there. And I already said my Twitter handle, so I think that's about it.
All right. Well, like I said, I'll reach out to both of you, or one or the other. Doesn't matter. I'll get everything from y'all so that I can include everything in the down below. Definitely keep in touch with me. I would love to be involved in the one shots, but even if it's not involved in the one shot and you guys just want to use my platform to signal boost, I'll let you stream it on my channel. I'll set up whatever I need to do for overlays and stuff like that, and we'll make the one shot happen so that you can showcase and get the World of Tele'Thala to a bigger audience. And anytime subsequent releases, be it the mini adventures or the next books and stuff like that, anytime you want to come back on here and brag about what it is you have built, then I look forward to it. So, and we'll have to have that. We'll have to have that. Tele'Thala, more content than we have time. Like that's
exactly. That's great.
Mike made the perfect tagline there. So
exactly right.
with that said, I'm going to go ahead and scoot on out of here and take care of the wife and the baby. So I appreciate both of you coming on and sharing all of what you've done and put together. So
thanks for having us. We really appreciate the time.
Yeah, it's been fun, and I look forward to hanging out further. Mike, very nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you. You too. Have a great night.
Bye, everybody.
Hey guys. Bye, everybody.